So as you said, I'm chair of BSD certification group. So I obviously think there's some good, some value in certifications. And this talk is based on my experiences in being involved in the certification game. So I began my system administration career in the early 90s and went through that whole wave of time when certifications were the thing to do. And I am personally certified in about a dozen different certification tracks. So I've had sort of a good idea of the various types of certifications that are available out there. I've done both corporate training for certifications as well as worked in academia. So where you create courseware and that you work with larger diploma programs. And in this talk, we're going to talk about sort of what the rules of the game are and where the rules maybe need to be changed and where a person can derive value from certification. A little bit tongue-in-cheek because when we're dealing with certification, there's a lot of bad stuff out there. So we're going to talk about the good and the bad. So this is also subtitled How to Become Certified Without Becoming Certifiable. I am certified. I'll leave it up to you to think if I'm certifiable or not. And it's also titled The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I'm dealing specifically with system administration certification exams. So we're going to start by looking at the bad and the ugly. And stick around, because it's not all bad and ugly. There actually is some good out there when it comes to dealing with certifications. So as we're going through these, I'll try not to name particular programs in particular. But if you have written certifications before, you'll probably recognize some of these. And feel free to go, oh, yeah. We'll try not to mention names, though. So let's start with the bad. And typically, when we think about what's bad in certifications, I wrote down MCSEs because that's typically what people think of when they hear the term paper, but you can fill that in with whatever program is appropriate for you. So what gives certifications a bad name is the idea that the certification itself, one, isn't worth the paper that it's written on, and two, it's basically somebody who doesn't know what they're doing getting a certain designation. And this is sort of, I'm picking on the dummy series, because if I'm going out, say I want to get certified in a certain track, there's typically all kinds of books that I can use for training purposes. And the dummy series, I actually see there's value in it. Because you take somebody who knows absolutely nothing about a topic, that series of books will bring them up to speed. The scary part is if we're dealing with system administration, I don't want someone who knows absolutely nothing about a topic very quickly coming up to speed and getting a piece of paper that says, oh yes, I know how to do this. And that's the part that is bad about certification. The other thing that's bad about certification is the whole Braindumps thing. The fact that you can go out on the internet, probably find all of the questions that you're going to experience on an exam ahead of time, read them, know what answers you're supposed to be picking, and then walk out as a certified because you passed that program. Now I'm assuming everybody has heard of Braindumps before? Okay, well, they exist. And most of the programs that have been around for a while, the questions on the exam have been leaked out. So it is possible to go and know what's going to be on the exam before you go and take it. And that's sort of one of the not so good things about certifications. At the end of this talk, there will be a URL to the slides. And this particular slide has some more information on Braindumps. So that's a new concept to you. Then we start getting into the ugly. We start looking at what's actually involved in a particular program. So if you go in to take the exam. And one of the ugly things that's out there is that the only way to pass the exam is to take the official training program. And typically that official training program is only available from the vendor of the product that you're trying to be certified in. It's usually a week-long program, costs several $1,000s to take. And that's not a bad thing in itself, because who besides the vendor themselves knows their product better? What makes this ugly is if the only way to pass the exam is to take this program, because the information you need to take the exam is not available elsewhere. Or the information that they officially publish, as in what you need to know for the exam, has nothing to do with the exam itself. And you don't find that out till you go and take the exam. So really what happens is this type of training program is really a very expensive brain dump. You're going there not to learn how to use that product, but to learn how to answer the questions on the exam. And that's something that exists. Two of the certification tracks that I followed, that was their training strategy. More ugly. Anybody who's been involved in academia has heard of the term psychometrics, and anybody who's ever been involved in a good certification program has hopefully heard of the term psychometrics. For those who haven't heard of the term psychometrics, dictionary definition is it's the science of assessment. Real world, if you've ever written certification exams, within 3 questions you can tell, is this a psychometrically valid exam? Because there are certain things that you do not do in a psychometrically valid exam. So the point of psychometrics is to see if I have published a list of skills that I say that you need to know in order to pass an exam. The point of the exam is to see, are you able to do that list of skills? The point of the exam isn't to try to trick you to make sure you don't pass the exam. The point of the exam isn't to give you questions that don't assess your skill level, but instead assess other things, like can you figure out what question it is that I'm trying to ask you? That's not psychometrically valid. And those of you who've taken exams before, if you see an exam question that says choose all that are correct, and there's a list from A to N, that's not psychometrically valid. You're actually trying to trick someone. If you give them that many possibilities and they miss one or they do too much extra, they don't get the points for that. And you're not really trying to test their understanding. You're trying to say, out of 100 people, 2 people will pick the correct amount of answers. That's what you're trying to do. If you've written an exam and you have to read through 3 screens of irrelevant information about Bob and his company and all the machines that they have and the various things that Bob has to do, and the question itself is hidden somewhere in those 3 screens and it's about 5 words, which are the actual question, that is not psychometrically valid. You're actually wasting the person's time, forcing them to figure out what is it that you want me to do. You're not asking them to do something. I've written an exam where I've seen questions that aren't just grammatically incorrect, because I'm a grammar person, I'm a bit anal about it, but they're actually grammatically impossible. There were questions that did not contain any verbs. There were questions that contained adjectives and no noun. And it's like, this isn't even a question. What am I supposed to do with this? And it was obvious that the question writers for that particular program, English was not their first language. And it didn't go through a process to make sure that the questions actually made sense. And in that one, it's just a crapshoot, you know, toss a quarter and pick A, B, C, or D. Some exams you write, and if you're already a geek, you're already a technical person, they just sort of grate on you, because the questions either aren't technical or you're going through it and you say, I know that they want me to pick this answer, but that's not technically correct. Or I know that none of these answers are actually technically feasible and I still have to pick something. And some of them are even worse than that. It sounds like the sales team got together over a couple of beers and wrote questions. You know, they were obviously not written by a technical person who understood the skills that were supposed to be assessed. So if you've never heard the term psychometrics before, that sort of gives you an idea of the importance of why that needs to be built into a program. The ugly. If you've been working for a while, you already know that everything new or everything old is new again, and everything gets rebranded, and everything has cycles, and it seems like the certifications that you're being asked by your employer to take are talking about whatever's hot this year. So when clouds became the hot thing, you're supposed to be taking a cloud certification. You could have certifications on virtualization. And oftentimes it feels, especially if you already have written other certifications, it's like next year, you know, what's going to be hot next year? What am I going to have to learn? And whatever I'm learning 2 years from now, nobody's going to care about anymore. And you often feel that you are being forced to take exams that don't really increase your skill set. They're probably forcing you to memorize stuff that have absolutely nothing to do with your day-to-day tasks, and that you are also getting to learn more terminology. So what used to be the term for this, there's now some brand new hot marketing term, and that's the term that you have to recognize on an exam. And most of us have already memorized more acronyms than we ever need to learn to live with, and there's always new acronyms being spurned out. The other thing that can get ugly about certifications is costs, and it's costs not just to certificants, but also to programs, people who maintain certification programs. And one of the things that I have always found very interesting, considering that if you are offering skill-based exams to people who use skills for their jobs, so we're talking system administrators, psychometrics is how you achieve that, but I have never seen an exam program market that. And often programs, as they're being put together, a lot of people will know about psychometrics, but psychometrics are expensive to achieve. You have to actually hire a psychometrician who is somebody with a lot of education and makes a lot of money. And because nobody markets that as value, it's why should we be spending our money on that if that's not something that we can sell anyways? So this is something that I would like to see change over the next 10 years, that people can actually realize, hey, there are some exams that are actually better than others, and that's the reason they are. And that should be part of selling that exam. But I've yet to see that. Exams themselves are very expensive to maintain. You end up with a bank of questions. You know that over time those questions will get leaked and possibly put up on Braindumps. But it's expensive, especially if you're offering computer-based exams where you have to pay fees if you change any questions. It's very expensive to change the exam. And for every exam that you have published, if there's more than one version of the exam, you have to pay for each of those just to maintain that. And what you'll find is a lot of programs will only have one version of the exam. So if you have a bunch of employees going in to take the certification, they talk to each other afterwards, they realize they all took the same version of the exam. Because they'll say, yeah, I had that question too. And you'll end up with questions that rarely change. And that brings down the value of the certification as more people become aware of the type of questions they're going to see on that exam. And it costs money to change those. Many programs force you to recertify, so you can actually lose your certification status. And I always hear a ka-ching, ka-ching in the back whenever I see the word recertification. Because it's like, I've already proved to you that I had those skills. Why do I have to go in and take the exam again to prove it to you all over again? Has your product changed that much in the time since I was certified? And if you end up, especially with vendor certifications, it seems like every time they add new features and they come out with a new and improved model, there's a new and improved certification. And it's like basically all you're doing is learning new features. And that's what you're doing. So it seems like you are never really certified. It's a never-ending process. There's always something else that you have to update your certification with. So that was a lot of bad and ugly. There is a lot of good in certification, and there is value in certification. And here I've written down what I consider to be the greatest values that you should be getting out of a certification. So if you're dealing with people who have skills, there is great value in quantifying what tasks comprise those skills. So if I am aiming to become, for example, a good system administrator, I can look at that list of tasks and see where my skills are gauged against that. And if there are skills that I'm lacking, I know there are new things that I can learn that will add to my skill set. If I am hiring people and I know that they have a certain certification, if there's a list of tasks that comprise that skill set, I can say, well, you had to prove that you were able to do this, 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 and this in order to achieve that certification. So it also provides values to employers, because in theory, that's what they're hiring. What we find, especially with system administration, that a lot of the skills that you learn, you never picked up in a book and you never picked up from a certification. You learn those skills by having to know how to do that, to do your day-to-day tasks. But what you'll find is you may not always understand the concepts behind those tasks or why things are the way they are, what's sort of the history behind what it is that I'm doing. And you often come up with experience gaps. So far in my job, I've had to concentrate on this, but I've never had a chance to learn these skills. And one of the values of a good certification program is if I have those lists of skills and I want to achieve that certification, I'm actually forced to, one, sit down and learn those skills that I happen to miss along the way. And if there's good training available, I may actually learn some of the background behind what it is I've been doing all these years. And I can go, that's why it's like that. This is where that came from. So it can actually add to your bigger picture on what it is that you're doing. There's also great value in being a member of a community of people who have the same skills. And having a certification program is a way to find out who those people are. So these are the things that I consider to be the hallmarks of a well-designed certification program, and something I'd be looking for if I was looking to become certified in something. So if I'm going out asking myself, I want to look for a good program, especially if I'm starting out, I want to know what certification should I be looking at to add to my skill set. Very first thing I do when I'm considering certification is I go to their website and I look for their exam objectives. Because in theory, that's that list of skills that says you need to know how to do this, this, and this in order to pass that exam. And I always print that off, put it on the fridge, and I refer to it as I'm studying. And I cross off the stuff that I know as I learn how to do that. When I'm looking at those objectives, I'm looking to see where are the verbs. Are they asking for skills, or are they asking more for features? Be able to recognize what screen do I go into in order to do this. So are they seeing if I actually know how to have skills. Once I'm finished with their website, it's time to go out and see what the rest of the world is saying about that program. So is it easy for me to find Braindumps Is it easy for me to find forums where people who have taken the exam talk about, what the exam was like, what value they received from getting that certification? And the other thing that I look for is, was the exam anything like the exam objectives? Or is that something that I shouldn't even look at when I'm studying because it's not going to be on the exam? The other thing you want to look at is, are there forms of training? So can I go somewhere and learn more about this? Are there study materials that I can purchase so I can learn on my own? And one of the things that I like to tell people is just, if there is a lack of materials out there for that certification, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And part of the reason for that is that when you're learning skills, sometimes the only way you can learn those skills is to set up your lab and to do what it is that they're asking you to do. And that's not something you'll necessarily get out of a book. Most books will just tell you, if you see this on the exam, this is what they're looking for. And depending upon the caliber of the training, some training basically is just like reading the book as well. It really depends upon the instructor and how well the training has been set up. So don't let it scare you off if you can't find any materials for that exam. If you're playing the certification game, obviously you want to gain some value from it. You won't always be taking exams that are well put together programs. Sometimes your boss, for whatever reason, needs you to take an exam. Sometimes the jobs that you're looking for are looking for certain exams. So really what you want to do is you want to know, what is your end goal? What is it that I'm trying to gain by taking this certification? So am I actually just trying to pass the exam? And you'll find, especially if you're working, you already have enough stuff to do, and studying for an exam is just something else that you have to try to find time for. So sometimes you don't really learn that much. You're just learning, what do I got to know so I can go in there and get this over and done with. And sometimes that just is your end goal. Sometimes your end goal is you really do want to learn some new skills. You actually have to use this product at work. You want to really know how to use it well. And oftentimes it's a little bit of both. So you really want to know ahead of time what it is that you're getting yourself into. If you are being offered a training program or you're looking for a training program, be realistic. Probably 90% of the training programs out there are not geared toward learning skills. Typically, they're 3 to 5 days long. You can only learn so much in 3 to 5 days. And their end goal is to make sure you pass the exam. So they basically want you to know what to expect on the exam. If you have a really good trainer, you'll be able to benefit from their knowledge, and you will learn some stuff during that week. But that doesn't happen as much as it should. If you're planning on taking an exam, it should be a given that you're going to be setting up your own lab setup. And this is so much easier than it used to be in the 90s when you had to actually start networking a bunch of machines together and getting the software. You just put up a virtual instance and you start playing with whatever it is you're being trained on. And the other thing that you want to do anyways, and we tend to naturally do this as system administrators, is you need your network of skilled friends. You need people who already know some of the skills or people who've already taken this exam before. If you don't have that network, go out there and find some user groups or forums or IRC channels where people actually know about this product, because you can learn a lot from them, especially if you're playing through your lab and you come across stuff. So a lot of people can learn on their own. Just give them the product, let them play with it, and they figure stuff out. And there are other people that really feel more comfortable if someone else can walk them through stuff the first time and let them know what it is they should be looking for. And if you can't get that in a training program, you may be able to get that from a user group. You can gain from any certification, even the ones going into that you know are going to be bad and ugly. And while knowing that you are writing a bad and an ugly exam will grate on the geek in you, sometimes it's just something you have to do. It's something that your employer is insisting on. Maybe the support vendor requires that there's so many certified people in their product at your company, or maybe that's just what human resources is looking for, and you want to have that advantage in getting that job. And even if the exam itself isn't worth the piece of paper it's written on, there's no law that says you can't learn the skills to actually be able to use that product real world. That's why you play with it. So that's sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly of certifications. What I want to leave you with is how do we actually change the bad and the ugly? How do we make certifications better? And I think we do that by reinventing the game. And to do that, you have to understand how the game came into being. So if we look at system administrators, the first generation of sysadmins didn't go to school to learn system administration. They were graduates in something else. They were working, these newfangled computers came in, and somebody said, aha, you're actually good at that computer thing. You actually know how to keep these systems up and running. You became the go-to person for that. That's basically how system administration came to be. And often what system administrators learned was in the field. And basically, as you were putting out fires and needed to know how to do things, you picked up the skills to do that. The question is how is the next generation of system administrators going to learn their skills? And anybody who's worked in academia knows that it's very rare, one, to find a program that offers system administration, and if it does, that it actually offers skills. It's not just knowledge-based, but it's skill-based. There are programs out there that do that, but they tend to be rare jewels. That's not what we see in most universities and colleges. Certification programs themselves have improved since the 90s, but there are still plenty which are very specific to a vendor, where the vendor only wants you to understand their product. They don't want you to understand the bigger picture. So they basically want you to be locked into their product. Us system administrators can do things to prepare things, make things better for the next generation. And one thing is if you do come across good certification programs, you should be promoting those. And if you have the time, you should be contributing to those, because there are good programs out there. When it comes to getting training for certification, most of it is boot camp based. So 3 to 5 days, you're ready for the exam. Well, I always considered myself to be a good trainer, but I can't teach you how to become a system administrator in 3 to 5 days. That's something that you really need to learn as part of a larger diploma program. So the certification can help provide some of the hands-on skills and be part of a larger program. And I think a good certification program is a tool. It's a tool that can be used to help bridge the post-secondary problem where there seems to be a gap between knowledge and skills. And it's also something that employers can use to bring new hires up to speed, because you already have a defined list of skills. I have some additional resources, and again, the last slide will have the URLs to this one. I've written quite a bit about certifications because I've been playing the game for so long, and I had a whole series on why certification exams suck. That's the first one. I've also written a paper, a more academic style paper, on how to actually go about making a psychometrically valid certification program. And if you're interested in BSD certification, our website is there as well. There's my contact information and the URL to the slides. And we still have some time for questions, if anybody has any questions. Yes?
Alexei Talolakin. Is there some list of the good programs?
Well, I think BSD certification is a very good program.
Excellent. Could you please tell us briefly about it?
Yes. So the BSD certification program was founded 7 years ago. We had, in the BSD community, on mailing lists, somebody would bring up a thread about every 6 months saying, how come there's no certification program for BSD? And that would immediately result in a flame war where people would describe all the reasons why certification is a terrible thing. And some people would pipe in and say, you know, there is some value in that. And that went on for a couple of years. And at one point, a couple of us got together and said, you know, there is some value. Somebody just needs to sit down and do something. So we contacted all the people who had said good things throughout the years, and we formed a nonprofit group. Now that group was comprised of system administrators and academics, so trainers and people who write programs. And when we got together, we had no idea what we were doing. We just knew that this was something that needed to be done, and we learned a lot along the way. And what we've done is we've run it like an open source project. So all of our processes have been out there in the open, and we've written them down so other programs know what to do. Obviously, the questions themselves are open source and out there, but everything else on what to do is out there. So what we've always have done is we've worked with the system administration community, and we've worked with psychometricians to find out how to make an exam very practical. So what is it that people actually do in their day-to-day jobs? And what is it that employers and HR people are looking for that they want their employees to do in their day-to-day jobs? And that's what we use to build the exams.
That's great.
Thank you.
How's this funded?
Well, everybody's volunteer. So we are on a very small shoestring budget. The only person we pay is a psychometrician, because I've never found a psychometrician who worked for free. But we pay for the exams through the cost of the exams themselves. And we offer a DVD where people have the tools to set up their own labs and to practice the skills that they need to know.
Thank you. Have you found it necessary to keep updating the exam?
Yeah, so that one paper on how to put together a certification program, the first step when you're creating an exam is you have to define your skills. And out of that, there's a process where you turn those skills into exam questions. And what we have to do is, after a certain period of time, which is either a set period of time or after so many people take the exam, we take all the psychometric data and how people respond to questions, and we see, do we have any questions that need to be rewritten because they're too easy or they're too hard? And we also have to look at those skills and say, since the last time we defined those skills, have new tasks been required of system administrators? So are there new features that they need to know what to do with those?
Okay, and do you provide training programs as well for this certificate?
So when we got together, we were only going to create the questions and the objectives, and we have open sourced our objectives where anybody can take those and create their own training programs and either contribute those freely or to sell them commercially.
Okay, so in a nutshell, you, the nonprofit, doesn't provide training, but you enable other people to provide the training.
Correct.
And are there other training providers?
There's been some, but not as many as we would like. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Christian Bauernfeind, Freudenberg IT. Thanks for the talk. We are hiring, brief plug, and as I've been giving more and more interviews to applicants to find a suitable person to work for us, I'm coming to the realization every time I conduct an interview, I'm doing some kind of free-form certification exam with them
Right.
that I'm coming up with on the fly.
Right.
How would you say that the things that you talked about with psychometrics and doing proper exams and basically testing for skill and not for the ability to pass an exam
Yes.
would apply to the interview process?
So I would suggest two things. One is to look at our own exam objectives, and as you go through them, they're basic system administration tasks. So we concentrate on BSD systems, but a lot of that would translate into any system administration. And I would suggest that you go through those and find a subset that is important to you and have that as part of your own process. So make up like your own mini exam. The other thing that you can do is if you find that a lot of the objectives would apply to the skills that you would want to see, is we could set it up to have a proctor come in and you could offer the exam to new hires. So do a dozen or so at a time. And maybe make it a requirement of employment to be able to become certified before we can hire you.
Do you have a good source on how to turn a given skill set into a good set of interview or exam questions?
We haven't looked at it that way. Now, we have had some people in our group who actually work for very large companies that deal with a lot of new hires, have taken what we start with is something that's called a JTA, or a job task analysis, and they have used those basically to see how people respond to those and to see. So it's usually a list of like 200 tasks, and they would set up, if an applicant could answer 120 of these, we think they have a very good skill set.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Hey, Eric.
Hi, Eric Radman, DE Shaw Research. One of the things I've noticed among some of my colleagues is that we're not used to reading anymore. We page fault, so I don't know, I Google. I page fault again,
Right.
I Google. Have you found that you have to kind of give some people some hints that you can type man intro, you can type, man ls and find the answer, and in other words, give people some hints as to how you can start to read to learn things.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So even when we put together our program, we have 2 levels of exams. So the first level exam is very introductory for junior level sysadmins. So that one is just a paper-based exam. It's multiple choice. But it was important that we put together that program that we weren't promoting memorization rather than understanding. So you wouldn't get a question, for example, saying which switch to LS do you use to do blah?
Right.
Because that really is not important information. Because in the real world, nobody memorizes those. In the real world, you've heard of man before. And you do man LS and you find your switch. Our second level of exam is actually going to be lab-based. And what we have to do is come up with how do we assess the concept that we're testing. So our rules of the game going into that is A, we won't tell you which operating system to use. B, we won't tell you what tool to use. We will say you need to meet this objective. So for example, set up a mail server with these attributes. Go in and use whatever tools you want to do that. But at the end of the day, we want to see, did you make this many users, is spam filtering working, that sort of stuff, whatever it is we asked you to do. So, and again, you'll find in a lot of certification programs, they're either promoting memorization or they're promoting, how do you get to this screen? And there's really no value in that because you end up with monkeys who don't know what they're doing. So
Right, so
we
you
try to test more concepts.
So you start with actually use the system, actually solve the problems, and you
Yeah.
move out towards the documentation
Exactly.
and so on. Yeah.
So we actually tell people, if you haven't played with the BSD system for 6 months, you're not going to pass this exam. If you have, and you've read through our objectives, and you've tried the things we're going to ask you on the exam, you can go in and you'll do very well in the exam.
Makes sense, thanks.
Thanks. Anybody else? Yeah.
If I may ask, does anybody have experience with the O'Reilly certification for Linux/Unix system administration and could share about it? How does it fit in? Good, bad? Has anybody tried it? I have a new hire promoted from
Okay.
help desk that I'm apprenticing, and I'm trying to make it go a little bit faster, so looking at what resources are available.
That one, I personally have it. Have you checked their exam objectives just to see what they're asking on the exam?
I don't see objectives. They have a course syllabus posted,
Okay.
but I didn't see on their website what their objectives are. LPI, I've heard of LPI.
Okay, you won't pass it. So their program is very similar to us. They started before we did, so it's Linux System Administration, and they also started in a very open source sort of way. So their exam objectives very well detail what skills that you need to know. Anybody else? Okay, thank you for your time.